flood and erosion protection is provided by our coastal wetlands, estuaries, beaches, and dunes. Water quality or water purification is again provided by our estuaries and beaches. Carbon storage, again, our estuaries habitat. So there is some consistency across our resource categories here of what's being identified as most vulnerable to climate change. And this will have important implications for the development of management decisions. And so the most vulnerable ecosystem services, flood and erosion protection, and this was due to the high exposure and sensitivity for this ecosystem service due to climate factors that will impact sediment deposition and erosion, such as storms, sea level rise, and precipitation. And carbon storage and sequestration was the second most vulnerable, but this was because of its lower adaptive capacity. And when I went back and looked through the scores, it looked like this was primarily due to the lack of support from the general public in protecting the provision of this service. This is probably an underappreciated ecosystem service, if you will, especially compared to things like flood and erosion protection and recreation and tourism and food production. Not surprisingly, the least vulnerable ecosystem service was recreation and tourism, and you can see that's primarily because of its adaptive capacity score. People really greatly value this ecosystem service, and they'll likely be willing to change their behavior in order to retain this service. Also, local economies depend on this service, so it's very important to retain that particular ecosystem service regionally. Workshop participants also noted that management is probably easiest for recreation and tourism because infrastructure can easily adapt and education of the public can help mitigate non-climate stressors to that ecosystem service. So now moving on to species, and there's a lot of information here on this figure, and we did actually end up